Welcome to the Franchise Founders Podcast. We are on a mission to help aspiring entrepreneurs just like you take action through franchise ownership,
allowing you to obtain more financial freedom, time with family, and ultimately a business that can run on its own without you.
Today's a very exciting episode because I've got a new friend of mine, Thomas Scott, someone who's been instrumental in teaching me all things home services, running a home service franchisor, and how to build a personal brand better. He really is just a brilliant leader in this space. He's been in franchising for longer than I maybe have been alive, and he's the founder of Brand Journalist as well. So he's got this tremendous background in lead generation and franchise development websites. And so in this episode today, we get into all kinds of topics from how to build a personal brand and why that's important as a franchise developer. We get into how to sell to different generations. We've got obviously baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, and how the different generations have different buying patterns from subconscious patterns of how they were raised and how they think. And we get into breaking down each one of those and what way to sell to each one of those. We get into what you should be focusing on for yourself and your personal brand as a development director in 2023 and beyond. We talk about the Titus Center and the Selling Franchises Boot Camp, something that I highly recommend attending. I was just there yesterday and the day prior, and it was an incredible event. We go into a ton of exciting things, and I'm excited for you to jump in and give this episode a listen. Very excited to have my guest here today, virtually tuning in to the studio, Thomas Scott. Thomas, how are you?
Man, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be on. This is my favorite topic. I could talk shop all day about this topic.
I know you're passionate about it, and I'm very excited. I actually had a friend of yours in here last week, Ben Wooldroff. I know you guys go way back.
Yeah, the macaroon guy, they've done really well with that business. It started out in Bryant Park and it's just exploded.
Absolutely. And I'm really excited to jump on here and talk all things franchise development, especially around the topics of personal branding, because I consider you the leader in this area when it comes to lately, like TikTok and digital and everything you're doing. So do you want to start with maybe just giving our audience a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah. I went to journalism school. I didn't get into franchising because I wanted to be a franchisor. I was a journalist in New Orleans and did some work for the New York Times and Associated Press and was a photographer. And, just in late 20s, early 30s, got into franchising. I bought a franchise called Show Homes that was a home staging, real estate photography and kind of home prep type business. Had 3 units. They were the top 3 units in the system. And then a couple of years later, bought the franchise company out, and it ended up doing, big entrepreneurial dreams, getting a partner and buying a franchise company. I didn't know anything about franchising like all of us. Kind of got into it that way. We grew that to 100 units. I learned every job you have to do as a franchisor to get from, 20 to 100 units, which is really hard back in the day. This is in the early 2000s. I started Brand Journalist. I sold that company, started Brand Journalist, which is a franchise development agency. We kind of grow franchise systems in 2008. That system's still going really strong. Jack Monson, our mutual friend, is the CEO of that company. Super excited about this year ahead for them. But they do recruitment websites and help people build sales processes and all the marketing around development and strategy and the targeting for personas. And we've grown, I think at the latest count is 420 some odd franchise systems and helped recruit over 12,000 franchisees. And throughout my career, I've been a franchisor of 9 different franchise brands. I've got 4 franchise systems. I'm the founder and kind of franchisor of today. And that's where I spend most of my time, is in the home service space, recruiting franchisees and trying to innovate in that space, and really committed to franchising as a path for a whole younger generation of franchise buyers, which is something I'm super excited about.
That's fantastic. And so my first question for you, Thomas, is as I've gotten to know you, I've learned that you keep yourself on the top of digital trends at all times. In speaking with you, I've learned more granular things that I could do better in my personal branding with technology, cameras, what's, technology to use. And um, how do you keep yourself so sharp on that topic? What's your secret?
Well,
Is it
you have to be curious first, and you have to really pay attention. And I think you actually said this weekend or this week when we were in Palm Beach, that you go to conferences outside of franchising to learn more about what's going on in the real world. Franchising is a fairly insulated industry, it's a pack mentality industry. We meet and have our own conferences and tell each other what to do and share our own best practices. So I really like the idea that you kind of look outside franchising, and being a journalist makes me naturally curious to start with. But, I always tell people in my history of franchising from the late 90s till today, there really been three really significant shifts that have changed the way we develop franchise systems, how we do recruitment, how we do marketing and lead gen. The first one was in the late 90s, 97, 98, with the advent of broadband internet. And all of a sudden we went as an industry from trade shows and advertising in the Wall Street Journal and, going to the IFE and all like toll-free numbers. It was really hard to recruit franchisees. To all of a sudden you had to have a website, and portals came around, and all this information was available to do research, and people began to become aware of franchising. And that whole shift from print advertising and PR to digital was a real shocker. It took a decade for the industry to come to terms with that. The other big shift, I think that you kind of probably remember, is just the kind of 2008 to 2010 when I started Brand Journalist, also in a recession, the same type of cycle we're in right now, where the social media platforms began to get traction. And Jack Monson and I were talking with you we were at a franchise conference in 2009, and we were saying, no, guys, you should be on Facebook and, like Twitter, and let's have a tweet up, and this kind of like, and they just about laughed us out of the room. They're like, nobody wants to be on Twitter, and what's the Facebook anyway? It's a bunch of old guys. And, Gary Vee came to an IFA conference a couple of years ago and really chastised the industry for being, really backward thinking in its approach. Facebook is where people are, all people, all ages, all demographics, all financial wherewithal. Like anybody you want to reach, you can reach on Facebook. And social media today plays an outsized role in our ability to develop. But if you talk to people in the industry, they're not leveraging it nearly as good. And then the shift that we're going through right now is really interesting. It's the shift where people don't want to talk on the phone. They don't want to fill out a form. The idea, like a Gen Z franchise buyer, the idea that they have to have a 45-minute phone call with a 50-year-old guy is like a painful, like they'll avoid that at all costs. The fact that they don't want to put their information on a form, like they just don't want to talk to people on the phone. The phone's like old people technology. My kids, I have some young kids, and they're like, hey, Dad, what was it like growing up when it was black and white, when life was black and white? Because that's what they thought was like when I was a kid. Was everything black and white.
like the actual world was black and
Yeah,
white?
the whole world's black and white, and so like what that's what the phone is, and so I use pictures of people talking on rotary phones with my clients, and they're black and white pictures to make that point. Like, look, we got to get off the form, and we got to get off driving people to phone calls and talking about contact rates. And so this idea of conversational marketing, where you're texting and chatting using chatting tools like Slack and Metaverse or Facebook Messenger and the Google Messenger and all the texting platforms that are so integrated with like Client Tether, the CRM that you and I are really fond of. That's a huge shift. Like the primary conversation is text-based, and it's permission-based, and you can't talk over each other, and you get this chance to go back and read the responses. It's a totally different experience. It's what younger buyers expect and demand. At the same time, we're seeing this move to short form video, the vertical video, the 60-second or less video on, YouTube Shorts, which is their answer to TikTok, Google, and Facebook Reels, all those things. And even native LinkedIn video, which is a really under kind of thought thing. But this idea of this kind of short form video taking the place of Google, it's the primary place people go to learn about concepts and do research. Like, if I want to make a beef stroganoff, I go to TikTok and look up easy beef stroganoff recipes. And that's where I'm doing my research on topics. And if I want to learn about a franchise, I go and look and see what's on TikTok or YouTube Shorts or any of those. And so that's a really different way of thinking about how how to recruit leads and how to create awareness of your brand. So it's a challenging time for franchise systems. I think you asked how we stay ahead as we just are students of it. Like you can educate yourself on all these things, but you got to be willing to let go of some of your kind of tried and true methods that make you successful and really experiment constantly. Because look at ChatGPT, the AI platform, which I haven't been able to get on for 2 days. So there's 50 million people using it at the same time. It started November 30th, and I think they said it had 10 million signups in the first 5 days. Like there's never been technology adoption faster than that. That's the pace of technology and marketing kind of evolution we're in today. It's intense. You see that in your business, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I mean, what I'm seeing in my business is what I'm noticing is that, the personal branding and leaning into TikTok and Facebook and
Yeah.
Instagram Reels and all of these platforms. I personally, I enjoy making the content. I understand. I know that it's important. And for me, I enjoy it because at my core, educating people on the benefits of business ownership and how it's changed my life and how it could change theirs is what I like. It's my passion. Not just
Yeah.
about, I don't care if they ever call me, I make $1 from it. It's what I like to do. I struggle as we were having this conversation today excuse me, not today. It feels like it was today.
It
Yesterday,
was literally yesterday, though. Yeah, it was literally yesterday. And
man,
80-degree Palm Beach. It's amazing weather down there.
well,
Didn't want to leave.
yeah, quick plug. I mean, Thomas, this was my first time at the Titus Center. And I knew it was a good event. I went, I booked it. I wanted to come. I had no idea how just incredible. I'm blown away by it. Honestly,
Yeah.
I can't believe I haven't gone sooner. What you guys are doing there is, and John Hayes is
And
doing.
all the credit goes to Ray Titus, who endowed it, and John Hayes in 2016 and 17. This idea that, look, we got to start educating. Like, if you up to that point, the only people that were in franchising were people that got stuck. I got stuck in franchising. My life took some weird turn and ended up in this crazy industry. And now I'm going to be here till I'm 80. I'm going to be one of those guys on a platform, a round table or something up on the stage. And that's just the way it works. And so, but maybe that there's a need to start educating people about franchising in the business schools, because they don't understand it. They think it's a multi-level marketing system. They don't understand how viable of a sector of the U.S. economy it is and how much it affects, because everything's franchised. Every sector of American business has some type of franchise component, and it's a real valid thing. And we have a labor shortage of talent. We have, and so, man, I've been involved since day one on that, and it's one of the best things professionally I've done. Like, I've just been able to, I go to speak to the classes. I've recruited franchisees as interns and staff, and their students have become my franchisees on a couple of occasions. Like, it's Aaron Harper, our mutual friend, was talking about. He sold a Patch Boys to one. Like, they're some of the most recruited students in the country right now in business schools, and they're the most desirable franchise students. And what a great program. Like, we need one of those. Every really good, serious business school should have one of those programs. Like, just, it takes a bunch of franchisors willing to get together and really share, like, hey, like you have this opportunity to be a franchise owner or to work in a franchise company. We want you, and this is a great career path, and you can, screw a job. Jobs are for losers. Like, just buy a franchise and be an empire builder. By the time you're 30, you can accomplish unbelievable things, because those young entrepreneurs, and you saw it when you were there, and I think you're 30, Aaron. Like, I'm 52. You're an old guy. you're already like out to pasture in that group. They're so young and hungry. It's really fun.
It was honestly, to be candid, it's kind of my first experience of really feeling like, wow, I'm old.
Yeah,
But no,
you're old. Yeah, well, it just gets worse. You'll get bifocals, and you have to go to the doctor and start taking medicine. And, just all downhill from here.
well, you keep yourself young. I can tell your energy is probably more than many 30-year-olds in your business appetite to continue to grow and learn. And I was really impressed by Kayla as well. And I think it's so cool how you guys are building businesses together, and what seems like just really enjoy that common bond that you have together.
I have 5 kids, 6 kids. I've got 5 daughters and 1 son, and 3 of them are really into franchising. 2 of them, they're too young, but they're I'm a big fan of family businesses. Like, why not start family businesses, and why not like create paths for wealth creation and career and professional development for your kids? Like, why is that a bad thing? Like, I think it's an awesome thing. Like, my first franchise I bought, the Show Homes franchise, and I ended up being the franchisor of, was a family run business. And so I had that imprinted on me. But, you can really help kids if they have an aptitude for it and they're open to it. And Kayla's, she's 24. She's been in franchising since she was 16, like at a professional level. She was doing Facebook campaigns and ad campaigns for Sonic when she was 16.
Wow.
Like that's where she started her career. So she's been a CMO at 4 different kind of service brands and has onboarded 150 plus franchisees. And she's like a juggernaut of her own making, and it's really fun to see that. But I mean, you heard her presentation. It's intimidating to get up with a room with 150 middle-aged franchise CEOs and FD people who know what they're doing, and just tell them, you guys are just full of it. You're missing the boat. I thought it's a really precocious thing that she did, but man, people were eating it up. You should have her on your podcast. She'd be a great speaker.
I would love to.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to set that up. Yeah, I mean, when I think about being in that if you were in that program and you're just getting out of college, and like your early 20s are the best time to start a business, and because your ability to take risk and to absorb mistakes too, right? And it's just so much easier to do that at that stage of your life, and you can live off a little bit less money. I remember when I was my first business in like the college age, and like, I mean, I don't know, $50 was a lot of money to have in your, I'd go to, I remember when I was 21, I'd go to the bar with my friends and, have some $50 was like a lot of money to be able to buy some drinks and beers, and I could continue to build my business and make very little money because it didn't matter. Yeah. And so you scrape your knees and you bump into the walls at that age. And then by the time you're in your late 20s or in your 30s and 40s, you're already a seasoned entrepreneur, and you probably will avoid the mistakes when the stakes are a little bit higher when you have a family and more commitments.
Well, it's some of it's a mindset. A big part of it is just what generation you were born into. I mean, we are all, whether we like to admit it or not, a product of the era we were born into. And we talk about with clients generational selling, the difference in baby boomers and Gen X and millennials and Gen Z. There's 4 really distinct groups of franchise buyers, and they're just radically different in the emotional reasons they look at brands and what they're looking for and how they perceive them. And if you explain a brand one way to a body of franchise prospects, and they're from all 4 of the generations, you're likely only going to communicate effectively with one of them. If you're my age, I'm 52, I'm a Gen X buyer. My favorite movie is The Breakfast Club. I associate with the 80s. That's when I came of age. So, I look at life in a very distinct way. Like, I looked at my parents, who were baby boomers, were raised to go to college, to work for one Fortune 500 company for your whole career and retire on a pension. They were very risk adverse. They were taught that there's this one path that involves you going to college because you're the first generation that's been able to do this en masse. And you go get this big cushy corporate job, and you work really hard and pay your dues. And that meant work 70 hours a week. You think about in New York City, all the finance firms and the brokerages that have those young guys like working like crazy hours. And as a result, for my age group, we looked at those people and watched them become alcoholics and high divorce rates and mental health problems and go bankrupt and get laid off multiple times. The whole idea of college, this one fictional career and a pension, is a fiction. It doesn't really exist. Like, nobody gets to actually do it. We look at even my age, think of like, what the hell is a pension? Like, who has that? Like, that's not a real thing. Like, and why would you work your whole life? Who wants to work 70 hours in a cubicle and destroy your personal life? And so, whereas a baby boomer would think about things from a real security and risk aversion, like, I don't want to buy this unless I know it's going to make money, or I know it's going to be safe, because I'm definitely afraid of failure, because they were taught to follow this really kind of intense line. A Gen X buyer of my age is much more concerned with work-life balance. Like, I don't want to have the 70-hour work week. I might work 80 hours a week so that I can go to my kid's soccer game in the middle of the day on Tuesday. But everything I do is around work-life balance. And that's how I view all brands. I don't really care what it is I'm doing to make money, as long as I can make the money that allows me to buy the freedom that I want. But the freedom is the part that I'm wanting. So if you're talking to those 2 groups, you have to adjust the way that you do your storytelling. It comes back from my
Mhm.
journalism background. You have to pivot the story. Like if I'm talking to a baby boomer, I have to talk about why it's safe and secure and proven and it's recession resistant and all this other BS. I'm talking to somebody like me and we say, look, this is a great business. If this is not an emergency business, you're going to be able to schedule stuff in advance. You can work when you want to and not, and you can hire people and here's how you scale. And it's, sustainable, kind of balanced work-life business. You can really enjoy the things in life that are important. You can take a vacation whenever you want if you hire people and you got enough marketing and that kind of thing. Then we get to your generation, the millennials, who are the slackers of the group and get no credit at all. Like everybody likes to beat up on millennials because they got a late start and we're the helicopter parent. My group, if we had kids that age, we kind of overparented them because we had a rough childhood. Gen X are known for being the scary generation. They just don't give a shit. Kind of a fun group of people. But
Sorry I want, as we keep going down this journey, I mean to cut you off because
yeah.
you jogged my memory of something you said. So we understand baby boomers, and then you spoke about Gen X and your generation and how
Yeah.
basically when it comes to like employees, it's like, the mindset of, just work. I told you what, to do and do it. And there's a difference.
Yeah.
And you're saying that you had, because the boomers were your parents and they were really harsh on you.
He did just the opposite. We enabled the millennials to be, not as structured. We kind of, they're like the kind of cultural. This is why understanding the era that somebody was born into is so important, because they behave in unconscious ways, have biases and patterns of behavior and ways of understanding the world around them that really make it impossible or possible to understand the relevance of a franchise system. And if you can't get somebody to lick the paint off the wall because they're so excited about buying something because they can't understand it at an emotional level, you just end up losing deals. So somebody like your age, you guys looked at the Gen X buyers and you said, wow, those guys are capitalist pigs. They don't do anything. They could have a Twin Peaks or a Hooters or a loan shark business in the hood. They just care about making money so they can go on the weekend to their beach house and ride their jet ski or put their kids in private school, whatever it is. And you said, well, we like the work-life balance, but we also think we want a mission-driven business. That's to make the world a better place. We care a lot more about empathy and feelings and making the world better and climate change and diversity and inclusion and all these other issues. There's a whole range of businesses that appeal to millennials that maybe not to older buyers. Like millennials are the number one buyer of home care businesses right now. Millennials are the ones taking care of baby boomers, because it's an emotionally rewarding business to own. So you just have to know that. And then you get to the Gen X, the Gen Z people, the very bottom, the 26 and younger group now, of which Kayla's a great spokesperson for. And they're just built totally different. Like we call them the YouTube generation because they were raised on YouTube. They've never not had YouTube. So they watched, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and the tech sector and all of the influencer culture. They're like the Gary Vee generation. They've been taught that jobs are for losers and business ownership is where the action's at. And if you're really serious about being successful and creating wealth, that's business ownership is what you do. And in fact, they're so extreme in that there's something like 80% of an aptitude towards entrepreneurship in that generation. They're a demographically very large generation. They're bigger than millennials and I think in Gen X combined, but they're also like 3 times the entrepreneurial aptitude, which is crazy for the franchise industry. And, they don't just do one thing. Kayla was onboarding a couple of franchisees at the table yesterday. We were going through some meetings, getting them through trainings. We had some FaceTime and it was a trip. They were like, she's like, well, what kind of businesses do you have now? And they each had 2 to 3 things they were doing as side hustles or gigs, or they'd have a job and then they'd have a business and a little side business. And the smallest only had 2, the largest had 5, it was a really crazy, she turned around, she goes, see, this is what I mean. Like your generation, you guys get one thing to make money and that's the one thing because that's what your parents did. But we think one thing's ridiculous. Like, I don't want to own just one franchise. I want to own multiple units of a franchise. Then I want to, like Daniel Plord, one of the kids I was talking to yesterday, he's like, look, I want to get this going. I want to, in 5 years, have 4 different brands with multiple units in each one. And he's 22. Like, he's not messing around. He's got a business plan. He's been through 4 years of franchising school with John Hayes at that program. He'll win. Like, he's a winner. I'll take every one of those I get. So it's interesting, if you understand those generations, it allows you to recruit better, and it really affects the way you market your franchise and the sales skills and the technology you use to engage people. They're just different. And, you saw in the room, those guys are so far away from having aptitude for all that. Most development people are not ready for that.
If you're enjoying this episode, please click the subscribe button.
And make sure to connect with the Franchise Founders Podcast on LinkedIn.
I learned so much from this idea, from you, from this at the Titus Center, and then today about this idea of selling to different generations. And I loved everything about it. The only thing that was funny to me was that I learned that, boomers and X hate millennials. And it turns out so does
Gen Z does too. Everybody.
Gen Z. Yeah, we're universally hated. But my redemption is that Kayla said that she thinks that I was meant to be Gen Z.
Yeah, I think you and we should have identify as a Gen Z in our Facebook.
I identify as Gen Z.
Yeah. I pulled that card on her yesterday. I said, I'm a 52-year-old Gen Z. She can't do that.
You are,
I just did it.
You can be, one of my best friends is pretty high up at Google. He's an employee of Google. And when with their leadership, or not, he's not the leadership level yet, maybe someday, but in his role, they have them take these very robust tests and profiles, and they identify unconscious biases that each individual has from where they grew up and their situation. It's you can be aware of it and fix it, but it's an unconscious bias that you have, whether it's about, whatever you have. And understanding that and improving it is important, right? So you can identify where you came from and your tendencies, but be aware of them and improve it or change it if that's your goal.
Yeah, it's in addition to generations, the diversity and inclusion, the kind of unconscious bias, which is a middle-aged, mostly white guy. I have Lebanese heritage, but my kids and their boyfriends were we were talking about diversity and inclusion training, and how that sometimes has some negative connotations and it's not always well received, even though I really believe that diversity initiatives are so important in franchising to create opportunity for whole groups of people. And as a rule, franchising minority business ownership in the United States is around 12 or 14%, even though the population, as the census defined it, of minority populations, is around 30 or 35%. The franchise industry, minority business ownership is 30%. So we're double the rate of outside of franchising. We really don't give ourselves a lot of credit for that. But that being said, it's not an either or. It is not because we had some altruistic idea that we need to be diverse. We'd like more is more. If you have the qualities of a good franchisee and you're interested and you're passionate and you have the funds to get started, we want you to be a franchisee. We don't really care. It's we're like the Army. We just care that you can execute the business model. That's what's important. And you treat people well and you have high ethics and good character and that kind of thing. And so I think that the whole diversity stuff is kind of it triggers some people. Some people get really triggered by that, but I think it's really helpful. The unconscious bias part of it, I think it's just if you're doing DISC training and you're teaching people about personality and behavior styles. I don't know if you've ever gone through any of the DISC programs. That's a really helpful thing to learn too. Because
guess my profile.
A D, you're probably a D, I'm guessing. DI or ID. Yeah, similar to me. And most of us are in that bucket. You and I would have a great conversation. We could talk fast and skip over a bunch of topics. And somebody who was a banker or maybe an attorney or somebody, a school teacher who fact checks everything, was high on the C, would be miserable. So couldn't follow the conversation. So becoming aware of your own bias towards your own communication and behavior style will allow you to become self-aware to how to adapt. And, diversity and inclusion, kind of unconscious bias, is just as important, just like the generation. So those three buckets of things, a good recruiter today has to be able to know what technology to use with each kind of behavior style, generation, and kind of background. For instance, I do a lot of food system lead generation and recruitment in the food industry with all different kinds of brands. And the biggest group of buyers in that industry is a buyer we call, for lack of a better name, new Americans. It's second generation immigrant buyers. The parents were from Brazil and South Africa and Pakistan and India and other various places. Korea and moved here and bought Subways and hotels and 7-Elevens and a lot of like aggressive franchise purchases in the 80s and 90s. And their kids, or like my kid, grew up in franchising, have spent their whole career in franchising or have high net worth, really good business acumen. They're fully Americanized. I mean, they're very sophisticated operators, but they come into a typical lead pipeline with a funny or ethnic last name, and there's an out of sync. Like they get dismissed and people put stereotypes around them, and yet they make up 55% of the food purchases. Lori Osley at Sonic, I don't know if you know Lori, she went to Qdoba, but she's one of my favorite recruiters in the food space. She's an awesome recruiter. Told me a story about a young man who's 21 who opted in to Sonic, 10 or 12 years ago and said, "Hey, Lori, I really want to own a Sonic." And I think he was Pakistani or Muslim of some kind. And she talks to everybody. One of the lessons I learned from her is that you have to treat every lead as a real human being with real goals and aspirations. And that's the trick to not have a bias. It's just to be uniform. Talk to everybody exactly the same. Don't make up stories about your leads and don't make up narratives and bring your own ridiculous baggage into a sales conversation because you'll just kill deals. That's all you do as a recruiter. And she said she talked to him and she goes, "Look, I would love for you to have a Sonic. You have to buy 7 of them. You have to have $1.5 million liquid and a $5 million minimum net worth. And at 21, you're just honestly probably not there today, but I don't want to scare you off. If you really are serious about it, here's my advice. Go to work at a sub franchise, like a franchise version of a sub shop, and become a manager, which is not hard to do because they're always looking for talent. Learn how to manage a P&L, learn how to manage food and labor costs, and do that for 2 years. Get 2 years of P&L management experience where you can demonstrate as an operator that you can produce profit and manage labor and food costs. Buy a sub franchise as your next step, and then get to where you own 3 of those. So have 2 years of operations experience and 2 years of multi-unit low entry level sub franchises, which are easy to buy. You can buy underperforming ones for pennies on the dollar and just, prove that you've got 4 years of experience. At that point, you're bankable and you have a resume and people will invest in you. And you can often become an operational partner with an investment group that wants to open 7 Sonics. They're looking for somebody like that. And so today he's 32 or 33. He owns 52 Sonics in Houston. He's one of their largest and most profitable operators in that system. And it has started with that conversation 12 years ago by not dismissing somebody. It's like literally that simple. So I thought that was one of my favorite franchising stories I've ever heard.
Yeah, I think it talks to like you can accomplish so much in 5 or 10 years when you plan.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means to get to that 5-10 year plan, your steps in the beginning may not be what you want. They're not that a lot of people want to get to the end goal sooner than the steps they need to take, but they'll get to the end goal faster. They go to the area and start like in that area. I'm sure that person at first, when they hear that advice, seems a little bit like they're taken back. They don't want to do that. But 5 years later, they end up accomplishing the end goal because they did the right steps in the beginning.
Well, I think one of the shifts that I think we have to do as an industry is we have to start positioning franchising of any kind as a path of professional development. And that's what Lori did in that call, is she laid out a professional development. That's what I do when I onboard a franchisee. I say, look, where do you want to be in 3 years? You just said 5 or 10 year goal. Like, I think that's really long. I try to get people, especially Gen Z buyers, to think shorter. Like, let's think in 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year. Anything longer than 1 year when you're just starting out is kind of just fictional stuff. So, but you can affect change in 3 years and 6 months and 1 year and try to get them to where they're opening a second unit in a 12-month period and they've made back their investment in the franchise. And that just comes through really careful pro formas and onboarding that stretches out through the whole year. And just like Lori did, she laid the path out for the person in a professional development path and said, "Hey, if you have questions, keep talking to me. Like, I'll coach you along this way. I'd love for you to do this. You'd be really good at it," and giving them some positive kind of reinforcement of their idea that they can do it. And I think that's something that franchises excel at. It's something that we're unusually good at and substantially different from a startup business, because in a startup business, it's lonely. I mean, you just started one up. You're working in a co-working space. It's it's like it's tough. Like you don't get a lot of positive feedback. You got to reach out to other people. In a franchise system, you're surrounded by a community of like-thinking people who care about you, and we're all in the same business, and we're all on the same team, and we have a flag to rally around. And I think it's a really wonderful thing because you can take a young person and make them an unbelievable entrepreneur by the time they're 30 if they start when they're 22.
I think what you said is really helpful too. Taking away generational Gen Z, Gen X, millennial.
Yeah.
Let's just talk for a second about age of the person buying. Age, whether they were 22 now or 22 in the 80s. There are patterns to just age, right? So I'll give you an example. When I was 9 years old, summertime, those 3 months felt like forever. Right. And you think about it, 3 months divided into 12 into 9, it's like 3 months was a big part of my life. It was from a percentage standpoint, 3 months. Right. And as you get older, at least in my opinion, it's interesting what you just said, because my brain can think now in 5, 10, 20-year increments. And I know that 5 years is very little. At 30 to 35 is going to go like that. It's just the reality. But when I was 22, if you were to tell me, Dan, if you do XYZ in 5 years, you'll be so successful, I would think like, I can't do that. That's way too long. With 5 years, I got to be six. I'm 22. I got to accomplish something. And so I'd have to see a much shorter path, like you just mentioned. And so it's interesting because if I taking your advice, if I was doing franchise development right now, talking to a 22-year-old, I said, in 5 years from now, you could be here. They're going to look at me like, you're a loser. Well, I need
Yeah. Well, they might look at you anyway because you're a millennial. They might just think that this unconscious bias of a Gen Z towards a millennial.
But they like Gary V.
They like Gary V because he like kind of what I've really, and he's a great role model for us. And I mean, I love that he just gives recipes away and says, this is really, guys, this is not rocket science. Just do this, this, and this. And if you really do follow a lot of what he says, it works. I've certainly altered a lot of the way that I do business around some of his thought, and it's really wonderful stuff. But I do think that, when I got married, one of the pieces of advice my father gave me when I was young, it was before I got married, 21, 22. He said, look, you need to travel. Don't have kids right away when you get married, because then everybody's getting married in their early mid-20s. Now everybody gets married much later if they do get married at all. And he said, don't have kids. Don't rush to go into this traditional life and have kids and get started. Spend 4 years traveling. Go abroad. Go see the world. Just go experience life outside of your comfort zone. Because when you're young, even though you don't have a lot of money, you're able to experience things on a really formational level, and it affects you. And if you soak it up in a way that when you're 50 and you go travel, you want to stay in the Sheraton and eat in a buffet and be comfortable. You're not as open to all those experiences. Like it's fun still. It's much, I enjoy traveling now as much as I did when I was younger. But I mean, my trips I took in my early 20s are like seared in my brain, and they're amazing life experiences. They're some of the most valuable experiences I have. Owning a business in your early 20s, you have a fearless, like high energy level. You're not failure isn't even a thing. It doesn't matter if you fail. Like I was telling Kayla, I was like, look, Kayla, like your 20s don't really matter. You won't even remember what happens in your 20s. She goes, how is that possible? She got kind of mad at me. I was like, well, just trust me. 30 years from now, you whatever is important now, you're not going to, you'll remember starting this business, and you'll remember getting up and speaking to these people, and the fear that you had and the nervousness and how you conquered it. And, that's where you form who you are as an entrepreneur and a business owner, those kind of things. And so I think, again, franchising has an unbelievable way to roll out this professional development path. If the franchisor is interested in that, it's a shift, because we were just selling franchises and teaching people the model and then leaving them alone to do their own thing. And now we're saying, look, I'm going to get you in this business when you're in your early 20s, and I'm going to help you get to 8 units. I'm going to grow my own multi-unit owners, one owner at a time, 1 unit at a time. And if I have 1,000 units in my 4 systems, half of them are going to be internal expansions from people that I put the time and effort into and built the relationships with. And that's a cool thing. I think we're at a really unique thing. I often say, like, in 24 and 23, 2023 and 2024, it's very possible that more people will buy franchises than have bought in the entire history of the franchise industry. We're in that kind of a shift right now if we'll wake up and take advantage of it. But I mean, you saw the group. I mean, it's some heavy lifting to get these guys to wake up. And it may just take new blood. It may have to get younger, right thinking kind of recruiters in that kind of understand how to connect the way Kayla did with that audience.
Yeah. And, we're coming up. I know we're coming up on our time, but something you said that really interested me, that what I learned in franchise development, if you're a franchise development director, a lot of times you're talking to people about owning their own business day in and day out.
Yeah.
Forget a job. They don't care about you. Or go for a business. Think big. Take the risk. And what I found is that because, and it makes sense, right? You're all day long talking about this idea of becoming an entrepreneur and business owner. All of a sudden you start to say, wait a minute, I want to be an entrepreneur and business owner. And you see a lot of franchise development professionals, whether they already came from owning franchises, but usually I would say, like, I don't know the percentage, but you see so many times end up buying units and doing both, right? They have their units while they keep doing development. What I've learned, and I think is important in my company, what we're building, is I understand what it's like to work at a company and really, but still believe it, like still own it in your heart and in your mind and work with an owner's mentality. I've been in those shoes. And so what we're doing on the Fran Dev side that I think, if someone's listening to this, I think it could be helpful, especially if you're structuring as a young franchisor, if you're structuring your development team. My vision for what we're doing is large enough that I can fit pretty large visions of my team inside of that vision. Meaning, to give you an example, our development, I believe development directors bring so much value to the organization. They're bringing in the candidates. I don't care if the franchise development director is higher paid than everyone in the organization, because they're bringing in when it's based on revenue, franchise fees, of course. But to me, it's an incredible expense. Not an incredible expense. It's a worthwhile expense. That's, fine, because you're bringing in enterprise value. But what I've learned is they're also bringing on in enterprise value that's longstanding. And when that business, if it's ever exited or, sold, they should share in that, because now you've got this development director who not only, who's actually part of your business. They own part of that business. They're a shareholder in your company. And obviously you have to do everything properly with the legalities of franchise laws. But what are your thoughts on something like that?
Well, I think there are multiple ways to grow a franchise system today. And certainly having high paid kind of commission based or, really highly incented people. I mean, one of the things we heard over this last week was that FSOs and the big platform brands, the Neighborlies and, like the big Belfours and the group like that, are really sucking 80 or 90% of the broker capacity. So like there's a handful of us that can do broker deals en masse, but it's getting fewer and fewer. Like it's just they're, there's only so many good brokers and there's only so many people in those channels. And that's really not the option that it used to be. So having a talented development director that can drive franchise growth and match that with really smart marketing and the ability to generate interest and create demand. And that's where personal branding is playing an outsized role today of, we're in this influencer kind of culture now. And you really think about it is that you have these Gen Z, they think about things in terms of influencers. There's somebody with a very niche-y, super niche subject matter expertise in a particular area. And that's what they're looking for. And so if you're going to grow a brand, like if where our friend Aaron Harper has a pressure washing brand that he just acquired, I'm really excited for him to see what he did. Some great stuff at Pat's Boys. It's going to be great to see what he does. But he's got to almost come off as a Tommy Mello, I think is the service guy that you see on TikTok that's an influencer about running service businesses. Aaron has to step up and be that guy about that brand and that industry and why business ownership's cool and what they do. And, every CEO or big kind of prolific development director is going to have to start building personal brand. They're going to have to invest. It's going to become a retainer-based thing that any serious person invests money into. Like it's not easy for the average person to do themselves. You do a lot yourself. I do a ton myself, and I've got an agency that does it, and it's still a lot of work. But the coaching through the idea of doing what Gary Vee says is you got to produce, no less than 30 videos a month, and a podcast, and have it on 7 platforms. And like, that is just like, he's literally got some guy following him around with a camera, like we were talking
Yeah.
about yesterday. Like, it's like that is how you create demand going forward in this industry, and then matched with kind of high recruitment websites that tell stories. I think in some systems, the structure of the content and the marketing strategy can take the place of that highly paid development director if you're really sophisticated about it. But that's a $10,000 or $15,000 a month expenditure for a small franchise company to do it right. Like, you want to get from 0 to 150 units and have a $5 to $10 million valued home service franchise. It's going to take that amount of investment in marketing and structure to do it. There's no shortcut. There's no way around that. And brokers are just not an option for most people today, like they were 5 years ago.
Yeah. Aaron, if you're listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cohen, buddy. No one's kidding.
I was just chatting with him right before the call about this topic. I was like, man, you got to check this out. Do this. Like,
yeah.
Your friend, the horsepower brands guy, I can't think of his name, deals with
Josh Skolnick.
Yeah, he's one of my role models. I've totally tuned into what he's doing on TikTok. Everybody should look at that. That's an extraordinary example of how a broker or consultant should create their own brand awareness and attract leads. And he has his email in his TikTok profile, and he gets a couple of emails a day from his stuff.
Oh, you're referencing Christian Dadulak. He's a franchise consultant. He's a really strong consultant with the IFPG. Yeah, he's always wearing Horsepower, which is another fantastic organization.
I don't understand the connection, but he's got a Horsepower shirt on.
I think he just loves Horsepower brands. He must show a lot of their inventory, because he's always. I joke around. I'm like, you look like you might as well just move to Omaha and work there.
A good case in point, though. Like, so you get into his brand awareness, and you like what he has to say, and he's explaining, here's what EBITDA means, and here's the franchises you should look at. Here's what you should evaluate. He's got really great, very, very thoughtful content. But you're going to get steered to Horsepower, because that's what FSOs are doing now. Like,
maybe he's doing it. Maybe it's on purpose. But I will say that what I'm hearing from you, Thomas, is if I was hiring currently, like if I'm going to hire a franchise development director now, currently in 2023, they need to have one of the reasons you're hiring them, one of the reasons they're paid so much money is because of the value they bring in their franchise fees. But where is that coming from? It's coming from the deep, intimate respect and relationship and respect they've built with brokers. They come with a book of consultants, right? That trust and admire them, and are going to follow them to whatever brand that they put their belief into. But what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing is that in a year or 2 years from now, or even now, it's going to be, hey, forget not only your broker relationships. What does your personal brand platform look like? Right. If I was a development director right now, and Thomas, it takes a lot of effort. You're right. Like this morning I woke up and it's Saturday morning. I'm thinking to myself, I just got home last night from Titus Center. Like there's plenty of things I'd like to do with my day. And this takes work. I enjoyed making content, but it's still work. Like it's going to take most of my day today, but if I was development director, I'd go right away. I'd go make a ton of, I would make that my value. So the next time I want to move to an organization, I could say, look,
like you have to budget for it. Like I have a 1 or 2 hour block. I mean, I have it structured where I record content. Either it's a podcast or I just do short form videos. That's become a kind of part of my week as a founder and a CEO of a brand. Like that's just part of it. And the handful of people, and it is literally, I can count them on one hand, of people that understand this concept and execute it are so much more valuable in the market than people who don't. And I think you'll see a shift. I have a really good recruiter, Kendall McGowan, who works with us, and I don't know how long I'll be able to keep him. I love him. He's been with me for a while, but as we expand, I was talking to some of those kids in that program yesterday thinking, like if they had the marketing behind them, would they be a better development director for this new generation? Are they able to relate and communicate and use the right tools and understand the marketing kind of obstacles they're going to have to Or we may be at this point in history where we need to think totally differently about who is and isn't a good recruiter and what does that really look like. Like, it's kind of an interesting time. It's going to be fun to see what happens in this next 2-year period, because it's, I love recessions. Like, I'm like with one guy in the room, it's like, if it's a franchisor, a recession is like, we love recessions. Can never waste a good recession, because the down market just creates massive interest in business ownership. And, franchises are nimble and can innovate and be more structured than an independent business, and that we just thrive in that environment. The whole industry thrives. So it's a good time to be franchising right now.
Yeah, I'm determined myself to have a younger mind involved in the thought contributions to development, so that we can catch that.
You're doing good. You and Aaron are doing great. Like, you would be on my list of 5 or 6 people that I'm talking about.
Yeah, but
like,
no offense to that. That means the bar is not high. I want to let's take
the bar
that
is
bar.
not high. Yeah, for sure the bar is not really high, but you could keep doing what you're doing. You and I talked about a lot of strategies over the week. You could do 10% of that and you would move the bar up. That's all it takes.
Thomas Scott, incredible guest. Thank you so much for joining. If you are a fan of this podcast, Franchise Development Playbook podcast, please, of course, hit the review button, the star button, give us some love. And thank you for tuning in. Thomas, thanks again for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Enjoyed it. Keep it going.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Founders Podcast.
If you want our help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business to anything in between, shoot us an email at franchisefounders@gmail.com.